it's great to see so many friends and colleagues and familiar faces, but also so many new faces that we haven't seen before and last year. So welcome to what we all hope will be a great day of learning. I want to give you a couple of sentences of background of how this all came about. Christine Derry and I, where's Christine? Christine is over there. Christine is now with MIT, but she's still involved in this venture. We co-founded the Digital Disruption Research Group, which is behind the organization of this day, as an experiment, really, to bring together academics from the business school and the broader university community and people from across Sydney, from the city. And that has been successful, I think. And so we then had the loose plan to create an event of some sort. So and we call it Disrupt Sydney, which just emerged and came about. And we ran it last year as an experiment, as a proof of concept, and it seemed to have worked. And so we decided to do it again. And the reason for the event and how we see the event is very tightly connected to the main purpose, or one of the main purposes of the university, which is for creating learning communities. Yep. So we see the Digital Disruption Research Group and Disrupt Sydney as a learning community, as a place where people come together to step away from their daily work, daily lives, to reflect, to mull over new, outrageous, sometimes silly ideas, to just connect and learn and take things in and just try to disrupt our ways we see the world, and also to disrupt and maybe cut through the hype a little bit that centers around digital technology. So we want to be critical at the same time, not just euphoric about hey, change is the only constant, but also to step back and say what are the implications, and is some of that change not just things that are repeating themselves and things like that. So welcome to what we hope is a great day. And one of the luxury of Disrupt Sydney is that we as the DDRG team, we get to invite great people. So we get to invite people that we want to hear from and that we want to interact with. So that's really a good thing. And so the lineup really reflects the thinking of the group and what we were interested in, what we thought we might like, and therefore others might like. And so that's the background to how the lineup came about. And I'll keep the housekeeping for later. I think I have a good segue to introduce Maria. Maria Ogneva is our first keynote speaker, and Maria is with Sidecar Technologies, ex-Salesforce, ex-Yammer, where she built the Yammer Customer Network, which is a great online community. And Maria is going to speak on harnessing the power of communities and cutting through some of the sort of determinism behind technology, which is supposed to make everything better, and looking at the people behind it all. So, Maria, we're very happy to have you.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here. Thank you so much for making me part of today, Kai. So Kai and I actually, or Professor Reamer, and I had actually met through the power of community. As he mentioned, we met in the Yammer Customer Network, or the YCN as it's known. And there are some familiar faces that I see from those days here, and some new friends that I hope to make throughout the day. So I am here to talk to you about communities, and as Dr. Reamer mentioned, to cut through the hype. And the part of community technology and networks that doesn't get talked about nearly as much as the technology itself are the people, right? The human condition. Why are we even creating these networks and these communities? And so I want to challenge you. I want to push you guys to think about a community in terms of creating a movement, and really take it to the next level together. So I've been working with communities for many, many years, and I've heard this term bandied around quite a bit, that the future is networked. And of course, the future is already here. So Mark Smith, where are you? Was nice enough, there you are, was nice enough to create this visualization of my Twitter profile. And as you can see, we're all connected. And there are people that I've never even met that I'm talking to about various things and things that we care about, right? Things, places we live are all reasons that connect us in social networks. But even taking it beyond networks and interest groups, there are new business models that are emerging through network technologies, right? So we've gone, and this is not in any chronological order, but we've gone from portals and bulletin boards of yesteryear to consumer social networks like Twitter and Facebook. And then we went to enterprise social networks like Yammer, my former employer. And all of a sudden, we started to actually monetize all this stuff. So instead of just talking about things that we're doing, the breakfast that we ate this morning, we are now using these technologies to make money. So I work at a company called Sidecar, which is a ride-sharing platform. So people can actually make money through an asset that would be sitting in their driveway idle. Airbnb, all of these models utilize the power of technology, social and mobile, to make extra income streams. Labor is distributed, right, through Elance, Odesk, and such. We can hire people that we've never seen before to do things that we need them to do. So the future of work is inherently changing. There was a study from Intuit that estimated that by 2020, 40% of people will be freelancers. Excuse me, that's a huge deal, 40%. We're all gonna be freelancers, if you believe it. So none of that crazy evolution would ever happen without technology. As I mentioned, it's all driven by social, by mobility, the stuff that we have in our pockets. It knows where you are. It knows what you're thinking. It knows you better than you know yourself. Will it bend? That's the second question. But these things are extremely powerful, and none of this would be possible without our phones in our pockets. Big data, right? All of these phones and all the things that we put out there put out data, and somebody has to analyze it. And then there's the Internet of Things, of course, right? So it's not just people talking to each other. It's things sending signals. In addition to technology changes, our society is also changing. So the technology is actually changing how we are as a society, and vice versa too. So it is no secret that the economic abundance of the 80s is no more, and we're all facing an uncertainty. We interact with companies differently. We don't trust organizations. We don't trust institutions. So we turn to each other as consumers, as producers, to get the things that we need. And we choose to buy things that are more unique and personal. Like I can buy an item on Etsy that nobody else has, and I can feel really special because that item has a story, and I get to support somebody I'll never meet in Atlanta, Georgia. So all this technology is wonderful, but here's the kicker. It's actually not about technology at all. It's about the human condition. And products that do really well, that go viral, and communities that really support people and are the types of communities that people actually want to be a part of, those are products and communities that understand the human psychology. And so the strategic advantage now belongs to people who understand how to motivate and lead in this kind of networked, distributed world, where everyone's empowered. Your employees are not even your employees half the time. Like at Sidecar, our product is our community, and our drivers, they actually don't work for us. So how do we motivate them to deliver the kind of service that's worthy of our brand? How do we get them to live out their brand in every single ride that they give? That's a challenge. So some old school examples that show that technology is not the thing that trumps everything. It's really humans. So eBay did a fantastic job all these years ago empowering their sellers. They really understood human psychology. Wikipedia is probably one of the most staggering examples of how to get people to work together in a community. They have worked out, everything. Motivation systems, reward systems, everything. How are people, organizing the world's information and contributing to it for free? It's amazing. Craigslist. Right? None of these things are like really sophisticated technology by today's standards, I would say. But they're extremely powerful in how they leverage people and their motivations. On the other hand, we have one of the most massive failures of our time, Kodak. So Kodak really failed to understand what's going on in the world and use the networks of its customers and employees to really pivot to something that the world wants. And so the bone that I have to pick with most companies is that companies treat community as a use case, as a feature. It gets sold as part of something else. And it gets shoved into a department like customer success or marketing or customer support because it's considered a use case. It's there to solve a particular problem, which is, deflect call support and stuff like that. But we have got to, and I'm going to challenge you guys to think of it as so much bigger than that, because community has an opportunity to be truly transformational to your business. So it could have been transformational for Kodak, but it wasn't. Kodak was too stuck in the way it was thinking already. Where in fact, community is a leadership discipline. It's not a use case. It is a leadership discipline. And we're going to start seeing CEOs and executives exhibiting the traits that community managers hold more and more. So I read this quote by the ancient Chinese philosopher. His name ran off the screen. Lao Tzu, I think? Lao Tzu? So I'll read this out to you. A leader is best when people barely know he exists. When his work is done, his aim fulfilled, they will say, "We did it ourselves." So that to me sounds like a community manager, because for us community managers, our job is to work ourselves out of a job. A community that's amazing actually doesn't, it works, it just works, it self-sustains, and it doesn't need a person at the helm of it. Most communities never get there. And so this new leader, this new community manager at the head of a company, what does that look like? Instead of command and control, this person is all about participatory organization. They inspire participation instead of giving orders. And instead of instilling a culture of fear, they get people to own the company, whether it's customers or employees. We can do this together. Because they're looking at it as expanding a pie, not as a zero-sum game. So what happens when you take this amazing community that's completely transformational, and you take this community-minded leader? What happens? That's when you can create a movement. So let's talk about movements. What are movements? Movements are these moments in history. Excuse me, I don't know what's going on with my voice. Movements are these moments in history that happen not overnight. They take years and years to build. They take incredible leadership, courage, and a shared vision. And we'll talk about components of a movement in a few minutes. These are moments in time that really change the course of history, that affect everything that we do as people. So civil rights, the Impressionist movement, was a big deal. A bunch of artists in Paris decided they didn't want to live under the rules of current, how art was distributed and praised back then. And so they created their own gallery. And we are so glad that they did. Open source is a movement, right? How do you get all these different people to motivate and to contribute code for free? They're not getting paid for it. And companies can start movements too. I know this is a little controversial, but I think Apple actually has a movement. Everybody wants one. And basically what they did is they took this person who was the creative, who was marginalized, and then they made that person a rock star. And now we all want to be a creative, right? This cult of a creative person is very much alive and well. They took a group that was marginalized and made it aspirational. So all the movements that I've studied have the following 5 traits. And by the way, it's not just about mobilizing your customers. You also have to think about your employees and everyone in between. All movements have a shared purpose. Why are you doing this, right? How do you get people to believe and really connect to something that connects to all of you? It needs a shared culture. Culture is one of my favorite topics. What exactly is culture? I love this quote by Herb Kelleher of Southwest Airlines. It's what you do when no one's looking. Have you as a leader been able to instill this kind of culture where people are not stabbing each other in the back, but they're doing the right thing even when no one is looking? Number 3 is a shared narrative. I love the work of John Hagel of Deloitte on this, and loosely paraphrasing him, a narrative, unlike a story, has an open end, right? It's open-ended. It doesn't have like the build-up and then the release and the hero. Instead, in a narrative, the hero is you, and it's ongoing, and you get to participate in whatever way you want. So it invites you to participate. It's actually a very community-minded approach. And all of that is nice, shared ownership, shared culture. But if the movement doesn't actually do anything, it's not much of a movement. Case in point, Occupy, right? It had all the makings of a movement. It was about a wonderful shared goal, something that everyone passionately believed in. It brought to the forefront, brought a lot of awareness to the issue, but nothing happened. So you can't have a movement without movement. So nothing moved, right? Just a bunch of people lived in tents. Excuse me. And so finally, how do you create movement? You have to have a leader. There has to be somebody really motivating people, driving people, getting them to sort of get beyond themselves and contribute. And it's that kind of community minded leader that's a steward, right? So this is, I'm going to slaughter his name again. Linus Torvalds. I think that's how you say his name. He's obviously, everyone knows who he is. He has been that steward figure for the open source movement and an architect of the movement that gave people just enough guardrails to run within, but didn't give them like directions on what to do. So wonderful. There's this girl from America telling me about movements and all this stuff. What do I do? Okay, so we want to create movement, right? We want to take action. So of course I had to create a blueprint, 10 steps that you can take to transform your communities into movements. So number 1, it's that narrative from John Hagel, right? What kind of narrative does your community have? Is it a threat-based narrative? Are you scaring people? Or is this an opportunity-based narrative? So I turned on the TV the other day. It was CNN breaking news, and it was like terrorism, Ebola, more terrorism and more Ebola. Okay, that's a threat-based narrative. I was really depressed, so I turned it off. And then the narrative that actually gets people to move and to give their time and their passion and their life sometimes for a cause, it's that opportunity-based narrative, right? It's that we can actually join together, persevere, and make something awesome together. Second, the Occupy movement, for example, failed because it had a huge goal, but it didn't have any tangible ways of getting there. So you gotta have really small micro actions that you can take every single day, because there's nothing more demotivating than having a big goal that you just don't know how to reach. So one of my favorite sayings is, how do you eat an elephant? Do you guys know? One bite at a time. I promise you no elephants were hurt in the making of this PowerPoint. So are your goals too big to succeed? Occupy, right? Too big. No actionable, tangible things that people could walk away with and do on a daily basis. This is why most weight loss goals fail. People say, I want to lose 20 pounds. Or I want to go to the gym every day, and they sign up on January 1st, and then they don't go. And then they throw out the rest of the year because they say, I failed. Whereas they could just keep going. And maybe they wouldn't lose 20 pounds, but they would lose some. So thirdly, focus on the method, not just the goal, right? So instead of saying, I'm not going to eat anything, I'm going to lose 20 pounds, focus on creating healthy habits, right? It's the little things, replace one meal with a salad, go for a walk 3 times a week. Achievable, small, bite-sized things that you can do. And every time that you achieve a little tiny goal, it becomes so exciting and motivational, and it gets you to do more. It's just human psychology. So when you do achieve these small goals, celebrate the living lights out of it. In your community, when your community members do something amazing, shine a spotlight on them. When your employees do something good, let them know. This is also one of my favorite sayings. They tried to kill us. They failed. Let's eat. So celebrate. Momentum is the most powerful motivator. So shine a spotlight, and that's actually, these small victories is what creates the narrative, right? It's what pushes the community and the company forward, because people get energized. And we live in the age of selfies, where we're all, self-absorbed with our own image, and we carefully craft our personas to show to other people. On Facebook, on Twitter, look at the fabulous vacation I'm taking, look at the food I'm eating, everything that we put out there, we're in control of it, but it has to be consistent with our image of ourselves. If you give me an article to share with my friends, I will only do it if that article is consistent with my values. If it makes me appear like I am smart or funny or know what I'm talking about. If it makes me look like a chump, I'm not going to share your article, right? So if you want people to join your movement, is your movement something that people are proud to put on their Facebook wall? Is it consistent with their image of self? So for example, here's some organizations that have done it well. They make it super easy to participate in their cause. And when you put it on Facebook, it creates sort of like this social validation. You're like, oh, you could contribute to charity water. That's awesome. Like, who doesn't like giving water to people in Africa? SOPA, like if you didn't put a Stop SOPA sticker on your Facebook profile a few years ago, people were wondering, like, why? Aren't you supposed to be against something like this? Peers is a lobbying group for the industry I'm in, which is sharing economy. And they make it super easy to really join in and take action and make it explicit to everyone that you've taken this action. You want to strike a balance, right? So you want to give people very tangible things that they can do, but you don't want to be too loosely structured, right? Because when people just don't really understand how they can take action in your movement, they're not going to do it. Think about Occupy movement. Don't want to be too rigid either. Community spaces. This is where community is super, super important. Rick Warren created his church. I think it's called Saddleback, on that principle. So it was failing, it wasn't doing well. And then he said, I'm going to get people to get together in small groups, and we're going to have this big sermon, this big vision, but the actual action and motivation is going to happen in small groups. And so what he did, and he went and empowered small group leaders to have the right tools to really motivate people who joined the small groups. So he understood how to work with community and how to motivate groups of people. So I'm doing a workshop today, and we're going to talk about this a lot. So if you want to dive into that, let's do that at 1:30. And of course, the power of community and people online is great, but in person is always the best. So these are pictures from Dreamforce. It's a Salesforce conference. It draws about 110,000 people every year. It's insane. Online is wonderful, but there's just so much energy that happens when people are face-to-face, they're collaborating, they're meeting. So I always recommend companies to have an event, at least one, where they can convene everyone and really share the energy. And you want to architect your community for ownership and participation, right? You want to have these loose ties, and you want to have that decentralized leadership, like our friend with the church and the small groups. We'll talk about this a lot during the workshop. And finally, you want to create Keystone habits. So this guy, his name is Paul O'Neill. He was Secretary of the Treasury under George Bush. But before then, he turned around a huge company called Alcoa. He was the CEO there. And it had an abysmal productivity record and a really bad safety record. So what he did is he said, every time that there's an accident in a factory floor, you have to email me within 24 hours. And if you don't, you're fired. So by focusing on safety, which is a goal that everyone likes and everyone understands, like who doesn't like safety? That's awesome. He actually made the company much better and much more efficient at communicating. So because the lines of communication were open, people actually started sending ideas. And so it was kind of like a mini enterprise social network, like way before its time. Pretty cool. And so if you do all these things, you will be in this wonderful virtuous cycle where you have the right leadership and you have the right community structure that gets things done, celebrates victories, and that feeds into your narrative. And your narrative actually gets more people to join your movement and your community. And all these elements have to exist and they feed each other. So thank you. We have time for questions?
Should be. Okay. We do have time for questions. We do have roving microphones. We've also grabbed a couple of questions off Twitter, so I might just put one of these forward to begin with. Matt Moore asks, what about followership? Right? We all know that a great leader is created only by followers. So how do you go about creating a followership if you want to become a leader?
I'm not sure that followership is the right model here. I mean, if you do all the things that we talked about earlier, people will naturally follow you, right? So if you are inclusive of others in your decision making, and you architect the right structure for your company and your community, where people feel like they own it, they will follow you. Except for they won't be following you; they will be following this amazing thing that you've created. Because people don't want to just follow some guy, right? People want to own a part of it. And so if you create that ownership structure, shared ownership, I guess, that's what people will follow. I don't think followership is the right goal to aspire to.
Thanks.
Do you guys agree?
I think Matt should be happy with that answer. Any questions from the audience, really? This is where you participate. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, over there.
So this is a participative question.
There's lots of feedback. Can I speak like that? Can you hear me? You picked on Occupy quite a lot, but I wanted to ask you, without discussing the Occupy movement, whether there are levels of maturity in the engagement and the build-up of a community where you almost have to have like a sacrificed movement that is almost like a herald of the cause that you're wanting to actually push forward. And the reason why I'm asking this question, if we actually look at the success that people like Piketty have had in the US, so the Economist was sort of like a rock star, and basically has been like a bestseller on Amazon with a fairly arcane book. The question is whether the reason why his agenda has been so well received when he actually published is because people like Occupy actually have put or raised concern about the topic he was raising. So my question is, when you build up those communities, is it the right thing to actually want an outcome straight away, or do you have to actually create waves of engagement and almost sacrifice the return and the very first waves?
I'm not sure that I understand that, but let's see if we can unpack it together. So I think what you're saying is that sometimes you have to sacrifice the movement in order for future waves
if you think as a
to take place.
Person, you want outcomes right now, but my question is, when you actually touch about the human condition and you build movements, yes, exactly, when you actually start to push for an agenda or an engagement, is it the right thing to actually want an outcome at the beginning, and how you actually frame a strategy so that the people who sponsor you and actually give you funding and airtime can actually buy into this, understand this journey?
Okay, great question. I should have had a much stronger caveat. None of this happens overnight. Community, especially, it doesn't get built overnight. And this is why, like, most businesses really fail with it, because they expect results immediately, and it's just not. It's not going to happen, because it is about people. It's about building trust, and getting people to participate. It takes a ton of trust. Like, if I don't trust you, I'm not going to build this open source project with you, whatever. So it takes a long time. I don't know if I agree that you have to sacrifice something to make something work later. In the context of Occupy, it was really, really effective at bringing to the forefront a really serious issue, awareness. Like, that is a cause that everybody should want to get behind. Like, who doesn't care about this crazy inequality that's happening, right? If you're human, if you have a heart, you care. But what it failed at is giving ways to people to participate, because people, you just assume that people will say, oh my God, I'm going to change the world and this is how I'm going to do it. Most people are not going to bother. They need very specific and very sort of small and actionable ways that they can take, actions that they can take every day, right? So other than going to sleep in a tent, there wasn't really anything tangible that I could do to join, this cause that I identified with, by the way. And so, it's a disconnection between the vision and the action. And I think the bridge that brings the two together is leadership. and really architecting the right sort of community structure where, you know, you have people who are leading groups, and maybe there's like a leader in every city, but it has to be networked, and it has to have, you know, some kind of output, and keep each other we have to keep each other responsible for the outcomes. Otherwise, nothing gets done. Did I answer your question?
We won't resolve the problem, I guess.
We can discuss that more.
I think it's really important. I mean, just to wrap my question, it's a very important dimension because there is, you know, the world business is all over the board here, and there is an expectation and a very short span of attention when you're given a chance to implement something in a context like what we're doing. And we're in Australia, right? So the analogy of surfing is quite interesting. Do you ride the wave that's been created before you, or do you actually have to create the wave? And I think what you find out when you work in business context to create a community engagement, we are asked two things: to surf the wave, but also to create it. And to create that wave is something that is. So my question is more: is there, you know, people must be theorizing, and we should be leveraging out of those theories to bring them into actionable insights. So that's the context of my overall question, I guess.
Absolutely, that's a really good
It'd be
point.
interesting to keep unpacking and reading about it.
Yeah.
Finding, you know, scholarship and business.
Okay, Maria?
Yeah, I don't think
I
it's.
hate to
don't-
interrupt, but
yeah.
I think we have one more. We have time for one more question. I don't want to squash anything, but I think there's enough room to connect with Maria later. So just want to give the opportunity to someone else to ask a question. Mark? Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Maria. My question is, do you, from your perspective, do you see differences across cultures? So yeah, I guess in our Asia Pacific region, whether you think how communities are actually working effectively and evolving in this business sense is going to be different. What's happening in China, Indonesia is different to what you see in America. And do you think Australia, sort of, from what you know of Australia, do we replicate America, or are we a bit different down here?
Well, in terms of community, I think more now than ever before, we're all global. So I don't think that gradation of like, this is an American community and this is an Australian community really is relevant. That being said, the local context is super important because each culture has its own cultural norms. And each culture communicates the way that it communicates, right? So people have different sort of power distances, different notions between what's public and private. So it brings like a really interesting dimension in how people communicate and how people get work done. But I think increasingly communities are global. And I think that's what makes it really freaking interesting. Right? The fact that I can go collaborate with somebody in Australia around a subject that I'm really passionate about, that's remarkable, right? That I can buy I don't know if Etsy is here, but maybe I can buy something on Etsy from an Australian artist. That's amazing to me, right? So your original question was, are there sort of specificities? Yes, absolutely. But I think, you know, we shouldn't look at geography as a way to separate us. Rather, it's a way to help us learn a little bit more. So, yeah. Thank you.